Hey folks, Roland Martin here. Today is Thursday, February 14th, 2019. I am broadcasting live from Charlotte, North Carolina, where the NBA All-Star Game is taking place. Coming up next on Roland Martin Unfiltered, R. Kelly could be in some serious trouble. Lawyer Michael says he's innocent. A videotape showing R. Kelly having sex with a 14-year-old girl. We'll have the details right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Also, the woman who has accused Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax of forcing her to perform oral sex in 2004 says she will meet with a district attorney in Boston with regards to the case. That's where she said the incident took place, the Democratic National Convention. Also on the show, Reverend William Barber says don't just focus on Governor Ralph Northam wearing blackface in 1984. He says focus on racism in 2019. We'll have a clip for you where he talks about that. Also, an anti-lynching bill finally passes the U.S. Senate. It was sponsored by the three black United States senators, Kamala Harris of California, Cory Booker of New Jersey, and Tim Scott of South Carolina. Also on the show, a black man, an aspiring rapper, asleep in his car in California, shot by 6 police officers. Wait until he tell you the details of this stunning case. The man is dead, and folks have lots of questions as to why he is no longer alive. Also on the show, we'll talk about a Georgia congressman in trouble for having a racist Robert E. Lee biography on display in his office. We'll share those details with you. And also, it was 1 year ago today when a number of Parkland students were gunned down at their high school in Florida. Lots have changed over the last year. We'll explain and discuss that with our panel as well. Plus, new developments in the racist and homophobic attack on actor Jussie Smollet in Chicago. Folks, we got a packed show. It's time to bring the funk from the Queen City on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go. All right, folks, Roland Martin here, broadcasting live from Charlotte, North Carolina, here for the NBA All-Star Game. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you, folks. A stunning story. Lawyer Michael Avenatti, remember, he was the attorney represented Stormy Daniels. Well, he says that he is in possession of a videotape showing singer R. Kelly engaging in sexual activity with a 14-year-old girl. Avenatti has shared that tape with CNN. They report they've actually watched the tape. Apparently, it is a 45-minute video of R. Kelly performing a variety of sex acts on a 14-year-old girl. Now, you cannot tell by the footage that she's 14. Here's the statement that CNN posted on their website. The newly unearthed footage, which lasts 42 minutes and 45 seconds, is clear and explicit. There are 2 scenes on the video, one apparently in a living room and another in a bedroom. A naked man who appears to be R. Kelly is seen performing multiple sex acts with the girl. She is heard calling him daddy multiple times. It is impossible to know her age just from the video. 6 times the girl refers to her genitalia as 14 years old. Now keep in mind, R. Kelly was acquitted in a previous case of having sex with an underage girl. Now, that particular video was circulated all across Chicago and all across the country. In fact, when I was the editor of BlackAmericaWeb.com, that video was sent to our office, and I actually saw that video. The jury in that case did not say it wasn't R. Kelly on the video. They said it was R. Kelly. The reason he was acquitted is because the jury could not ascertain in that video as to whether or not the young girl was indeed underage. And so that case went to court. Now, R. Kelly's attorney has told CNN he was not aware of this development when it comes to this particular video. But Avenatti has said he has turned over the tape to the Cook County District Attorney's Office. And of course, a DA in Cook County covers Chicago. Talk about a stunning development here. I want to bring in our panel, our guest, Dr. Greg Carr, Chair, Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University, Teresa Lundy, founder of TML Communications, and Pastor Shannon Wright, third Vice Chair, Maryland GOP. Teresa, I'll start with you. When it comes to this video, here's what we know. We had the huge documentary aired on Lifetime that had several of R. Kelly's accusers, women who say that they were involved in relationships with him. It talked about his long history of being engaged with underage girls. To have this video that Avenatti somehow received and then taken to the DA, this could be a game changer because, again, on this video, CNN is reporting that you hear R. Kelly and the woman referencing her genitalia as being that of a 14-year-old.
It's a disgusting disgrace to see this still going on year after year when everyone, even inside the African-American community, knows that R. Kelly is guilty as charged. We've known he has a problem, and for some reason, he is still able to grab a hold of these young women's lives, torment them, and disgrace them. So I'm not surprised that this video is now coming out. It wasn't a shocker moment, nor was it a lot of shocker to those looking at the blogs and reading some of the social media posts. But I think more so now it's really closing in where R. Kelly needs to account for his acts, and justice needs to prevail. Lifetime did a very, very good piece indicating the stories of some of those mothers and family members of those women who are a part of that detail. Although I feel like they did leave something out, which is an account of some of those women that are still being led in that cult, as they describe. So I would have loved to see a little bit more, but from that Lifetime presentation, it looks like the Attorney General decided to take the next steps, and hopefully that next steps ends up with an indictment and a conviction for R. Kelly.
Shannon, here's the deal though. We do not know when this video was shot. So we don't know that. We don't know if it's an old video, if it's a new video. But the reality though is that doesn't matter, because if this video was shot in, let's say, the last 5 or so years, you still have a question of jurisdiction. Now, they still have to ascertain the age of the young woman on the video. We do know from the previous case, the young woman who was in that video, she had some family members who testified, like we interviewed Sparkle on this show. Some family members testified that she was indeed underage. Then you had Sparkle's brother who testified that that was not his niece on that video. And so it's a whole lot that still has to be done before R. Kelly, before the Cook County DA can take this to a grand jury and things along those lines. But this new development certainly should cause concern for R. Kelly and his freedom.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't continue to press the envelope and do the things that you do and think that you're going to get away with it when you're in such a public arena. My husband and I raised 2 daughters, and I feel very much for those mothers, because it has to be awful and difficult to know who it is, what happened and where, and not be able to prove it to get justice for your children. And, you know, as a parent, you want to not only protect your own, but you want to keep this from happening to someone else's. So it seems to me as enough is enough. Somebody's got to put a stop to this somehow.
Greg Carr, now what you also have here is a difference for R. Kelly economically. According to that Lifetime documentary, and based upon what I know, living in Chicago for 6 years from 2004 to 2010, R. Kelly used his vast resources to pay off a significant number of settlements. You also had people who said when that trial came up, he sent families out of the country for a number of months to avoid them being interrogated by police. He's been stopped from many places from performing. You've had some places that refuse to grant him licenses to perform. You have his record label that's dropped him. You have streaming services also cutting back on his music. And so his financial lifeline has been impacted. And so that could also be a difference maker because he can't necessarily be able to tap the same financial resources this time that he did before.
No, but I mean, Roland, as you know, we're not just talking about the United States. Now there have been a couple of countries, and at least one country, R. Kelly, has had concerts canceled. But the last I heard yesterday, his concerts in Germany may be moved to a larger venue because they've already sold out the venue he's supposed to appear in. Perhaps this becomes a Roman Polanski situation where he just simply leaves the country to evade prosecution. But one thing we know for sure, R. Kelly is not only an individual who is now facing a charge, and of course it'll be interesting to see whether Avenatti's client washes out, which of course is this man who says he's known R. Kelly and the girl for years and can kind of corroborate this evidence. But R. Kelly, the individual, is one thing. R. Kelly, symbolic of a much larger situation, is something altogether different. We're in a different time now in this country. The Me Too movement, the question of evidentiary burden speaks to a larger issue. Are we going to be a different type of society now? And R. Kelly, if he can leave this country and maybe evade prosecution, we might be faced with another question, which is how far is the reach of this movement to kind of open this society up to these types of situations?
Well, first of all, you make a great point because we know that Roman Polanski, who skipped out on his rape trial in the 70s, and when the jury was deliberating, he has not returned to the United States since, even though many folks in Hollywood have continued to work for him. He won an Oscar for a movie he directed. And you've had people in Hollywood say that he should be allowed to return. And so, yeah, that's an issue. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kim Foxx, who was the Cook County DA, tries to move very quickly to potentially even keep him, trying to get his passport to keep him from being able to travel overseas. And so we certainly be watching to see how this story develops in the near future. Now let's talk about Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax of Virginia. We told you yesterday that Suffolk County District Attorney there in Boston, Massachusetts, says and if Dr. Vanessa Tyson, the woman who was accused of Fairfax of forcing her to have oral sex, if she will file a complaint, that the DA will be willing to investigate the case. Tyson's camp now says she plans on meeting with the district attorney. Now, again, according to her office, she's reached out to the DA to schedule a time in order for the staff to hear from Dr. Tyson. Again, the DA says that if Tyson makes a criminal complaint, her office will start an investigation. Now, the Washington Post reports that Tyson's lawyers did not say whether or not Tyson will file a criminal complaint. This is what we received a statement from the office of Justin Fairfax. It was reported, quote, the lieutenant governor has stated repeatedly that he has never sexually assaulted anyone ever. He has called publicly for a fair and partial investigation. He has nothing to hide. In that event, the lieutenant governor will explore all options with regard to filing his own criminal complaint in response to the filing of a false criminal complaint against him. Tyson's lawyer, Deborah Katz, called that statement, quote, a clear effort to obstruct justice. Let's go back to our panel. Greg Carr, first, I don't know how they can say it's obstructing justice because if Tyson files a complaint, Fairfax has the legal right to file his own complaint. And so I understand their sentiment, but that's not actually obstructing justice. But if Tyson does move forward, well, let's actually examine this from two different ways. First, if Tyson doesn't file a criminal complaint, but her lawyers have already said she wants to testify in an impeachment hearing, the question has to be asked, why would you testify or why would you go forward in an impeachment hearing but not go forward with a criminal complaint? Second point, if she does file a criminal complaint, what you now have is Fairfax, you now have an open investigation that is also different from the impeachment. Impeachment, he potentially could lose his job. The criminal complaint, he could be indicted, charged, indicted, found guilty. And so you have different things that are going on here, Greg.
Absolutely. I think probably the best thing for the lieutenant governor would be, and is becoming the DA in Suffolk County, DA Rollins, a black woman, by saying, if you file a complaint, we will investigate. That is giving a measure of legitimacy, a measure of process, and something that, as you say, would be the natural course. Now, of course, Attorney Katz is doing what a zealous attorney would do. She's trying to win a battle in the court of public opinion. Justin Fairfax is fighting for his political life, but as you say, he might be fighting for his freedom. But if, as we know, if it is as he contends, that he did nothing wrong, or he did not commit this act in the way it was been described by Dr. Tyson, the best thing for him is the district attorney in Suffolk County, and we'll see how this works out.
Teresa, let's play this out. Let's say Tyson files his criminal complaint. Let's say the district attorney investigate, and there's insufficient evidence to move forward. That would seem like a win for Fairfax. And then it would then call in the question that if a DA couldn't find any evidence, then how could you even go forward with any kind of impeachment hearing?
Exactly. So the scenario you just laid out, Roland, I think that is the right approach. If I was working as the Director of Communications for Justice Fairfax right now, I would definitely go into the that narrative of going into the investigation portion, despite what happens for his freedom and for his political career. Honestly, if I'm Justin Fairfax, I'm not worried about my political career, because anything that is taglined right now with sexual harassment, sexual assault right now in the media, is not looking good for your political future in the next 5 to 10 years. So what I would suggest is he tried to clear his name first and then allow the political response to happen post it. But I think, like you said before, it is a bit concerning that Dr. Tyson is not looking to file any criminal charges. It just really is interesting on that front. But I'm sure she has her reasons. But like you said, public opinion is the defining factor in this case. So again, if I'm a part of the Lieutenant Governor's office, I would probably say, hey, let's hold a full-fledged investigation to prove the innocence.
Shannon, obviously you've had Democrats and Republicans calling for Justin Fairfax to resign. We've had Teresa and Greg on this show discussing these issues. Just from your vantage point, do you believe that Fairfax should resign based upon the accusations, or do you believe there should be a full investigation, whether by the DA there in Boston or even by another investigative body?
That's a tough one. And the reason I say that is because you don't want to discount the supposed victims. But if he honestly did not do it, then he needs to make that clear. But if he did, and he's just doing this to be able to hold on to his freedom and save whatever pieces of his political career he can, that's a tough one. Like I said, these women coming forward, having gone through something like this, and to be willing to share it publicly if it actually happened, is almost like reliving it. So to discount them is not exactly the correct thing if it indeed did happen.
But here's the piece. How do you get to the truth if they don't have to further explain? Because
well, I don't think you can.
Just right. You have in statements where Meredith Watson, who accused Fairfax of raping her at Duke in 2000, her lawyers say she doesn't want to be in the media attention. She doesn't want to go any further. But in their statement, they called for him to resign. So and I totally understand your point, but it's a little hard to say I want justice, but I'm not going to say anything because just believe my statement that I've already given. Whereas if you're Fairfax, should you not have a right to cross-examine your accusers?
again, it's a difficult thing, because if these women did actually go through this, they are reliving it publicly. And that's a very difficult place. As someone that's done counseling for survivors
reliving
of
it publicly, but reliving it publicly is also the result of when you come out publicly and make the accusation.
True. That is true. I've seen cases where there was a family that I had to deal with. There was a man that had done some things or was accused of doing some things, and another woman didn't come forward until this man was about to be granted custody of a young girl. And she said, listen, I can't let that happen. I don't want to get out there in front of it like that, but I need you to understand this is what he did to me, and I don't want to see him do that to someone else. And there's a difference between coming forward because you want to protect someone else than if you just come forward because you want spotlight. So that's why I'm saying it's a difficult choice, because if this actually happened, that's happening again for them.
Yeah, and race and gender are so commingled in here. And for those who are watching, I think that it's clear there's been no more nuanced and sophisticated conversation of this unfolding story than right here in Roland Martin Unfiltered. I would encourage people to go back over the last several days and since this story broke to listen to the fact, and it's exactly as Pastor Rice says, it's a torturous situation. And as I say, Justin Fairfax, Dr. Tyson, and the third accuser, the best thing for this entire situation is to get these criminal complaints filed, have an investigation, and move forward, because it's not just black men, it's black women. There's no Me Too movement that transcends race. And so these black women are being drugged, these black men are being drugged, and the black community really doesn't have a position other than let's try to get at an accurate assessment of what happened. And the stuff in the legislature, that's pure politics. It has nothing to do with the truth. It's all politics.
All right, folks, speaking of politics, let's talk about the whole issue of Virginia blackface and racism. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, of course, he's been quite vocal on this, and he appeared this morning on Morning Joe, where he said that the focus should not just be on Ralph Northam and the issue of racism in 1984. He is challenging the media and the public to contend with acts of racism and bigotry happening in 2019. Watch this, and then we'll discuss.
Well, repenting in the Bible and in the story of Zacchaeus, when he wanted to have salvation come, Jesus said, okay, restore what you've done. So some people said earlier, resign, resign, resign. I stepped back and said, wait a minute. Because if you resign and resign to resign, you only get to somebody who participated in racist voter suppression. So if the issue is resigning because of racism, for instance, the entire Republican legislature in North Carolina has to resign because they were found guilty in the courts of surgical racism. So let's step back a second. The repentance could be Northam doing a major speech on what racism really is, and then immediately laying out policy. For instance, he could say the Union Hill African-American community where environmental racism is happening because of the Atlantic pipeline. I'm going to no longer support that pipeline. I'm going to go after voter suppression. Now, I'm going to fight for same-day registration, early voting in Virginia, and automatic registration. I'm going to look at the issue of public education and mass incarceration. Not just look at it, but now. But just having an apology is not enough. And just only talking about, and I challenge the media, if we only talk about racism when somebody talks about the size of someone's calves or a picture 30 years ago, we are not dealing with disparate impact and real racism that's happening. We need to look at what's happening in the appointment of these federal judges on the courts. We need to look at disparate treatment in health care, the disparate treatment in living wages. 62 million Americans make less than a living wage. 54% of them are African American. We need to look at all of this voter suppression happening across the country. So we need to have a real serious depth focus on racism and how that ties to systemic poverty, ecological devastation as well, the war economy, militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism.
So let's unpack this first with our panel. And Greg, I want to go to you first. The real issue, though, is that what Rev Barber just said. It also has to take place by those in media. You now have Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski now calling out Trump for his attacks on brown people. But they also had him on their show in 2015,
Yes.
in 2016.
Yes.
You know, they talked about advising him when he first got in on certain folks to bring on and appoint. Now, all of a sudden, when he shows his true colors, which we all knew beforehand, now it's, oh my God, who is this guy? Same thing. You look at CNN, the number of town halls and forums they showed of Trump. Now it's, oh my God, he's now attacking the media. Obviously, Fox News completely in bed with Donald Trump. I dare contend that the fundamental problem that you have with the inability to confront the issue of race in our public policy today is because unless it's a burning flag, unless it's a swastika, unless it is this overt symbol of racism, mainstream media will not drive this conversation.
No, of course not. In fact, it's interesting. Joe Scarborough makes me laugh out loud when I accidentally scan past him in the mornings getting ready to leave with his condemnations now to say, well, we have to call out a lie. And I'm laughing because, of course, for years, as you were talking about Trump lying, in the same broadcast studio floor as him, they were talking about their friend, Donald Trump, he and Mika. And let's be very clear. Talking about individual acts of racism, as our friend Dr. Barber says, allows systemic racism to hide. That's why they're so happy to talk about these individual acts. Morning Joe every morning enables some of the most virulent reproduction of systemic racism on a regular basis. I mean, in this same today or yesterday morning, perhaps it was this morning, they talked about the anti-Semitism and, get out of Representative Ilhan Omar's face with that anti-Semitic charge. It doesn't hold any weight. You can't attack AIPAC. You can't have any criticism. They are not going to deal with systemic racism, and talking about overt acts of racism allows them to hide behind this lie that they somehow want to address racism, when in fact they want to address everything but racism.
Shannon, again, this is not for me an issue of Republican or Democrat. What it is an unwillingness of people to have a real examination of these issues and how they play. If you really want to talk about education today, like for instance, we've had these debates where folks have said, "Oh my goodness, charter schools are the reason our schools are segregated today," and I'm going, "No, they were pretty segregated before charter schools, because you have to now look at neighborhoods. You now must look at income." When you begin to talk about other issues, environmental racism, you have to deal with many of these environmental catastrophes deliberately being placed where poor people live, where black people live, and brown people live. And again, I just think that the reason you do not have the substantive dialogue that is deeper than mustard on a hot dog is because you have mainstream media that is only interested in the flavor of the day, can't do two things at one time, and does not have the structural ability to be able to confront this, because the executive suites of many of these media companies are largely white men who are not concerned about these issues.
Well, I don't think it's just they don't have the structure, they don't have the desire to confront it. And it really comes to that, because if you desire to do it, you will find the structure to do it. But they don't want to. And I do agree, it is not, it being racism is not confined to one party. One of the things that, for me in Maryland, is that there's a Black Republican Council. And when people say, well, what does that do? Are you, an apologist for things? No. I explain to people how to keep their toes out of their mouths. And that's how I break it down for folks. I ask you, do you like salt or sugar with that? Or would you like me to show you how to keep those toes out of your mouth? So in doing that, I come across a lot of folks that genuinely don't recognize how ignorant they are. Like, they're blind to it. Not deliberately blind. No, I mean actually no concept and clue whatsoever. So to fix that, you have to recognize there's a that to fix. And a lot of these folks don't. They genuinely don't see it. Oh, you're just emotional,
Teresa,
you're just sensitive.
Teresa, the point Reverend Barber is making is that if you want to examine Northam, you have to say, okay, Governor, Why is it during the campaign you supported a pipeline that is going to run through and devastate a black community, just in Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor, and not support that pipeline? That is a substantive issue that, again, should be addressed, but frankly, it is not one that you're likely to see discussed on any of these mainstream shows. Black shows like this one, yes. Them, no.
You won't, because like Pastor Wright said, they don't have the desire to. It doesn't matter. You know me, Roland, by now, I'm always going to relate something that happens mainstream locally. And so, like, with the issues that's happening, especially in Philly, that's where I'm from, and some of the union issues that's happening, especially with the police department. We just had a case the other day. 18-year-old young woman was grabbed by her hair, literally all caught on video, grabbed her by her hair and slammed to the ground. Police officers calling every other name in the book, Black B, you know, stupid HOE. Well, I guess I could say that. So, you know, I see these things, and, you know, gratefully our DA did not press charges. But what you now see is is the union either being silent about it, which tells me that leadership has to change, right? And so conveying it back to what we're talking about with Pastor Barber, he wants the same thing. He knows change that needs to happen, and he's wondering what will it take in order for the systematic change to happen. But I also think it needs to be, instead of, you know, us just putting diversity in the rooms, there has to be a whole cleaning of the behind the scenes of senior leadership who's been there for 30 and 40 years with the same mindset.
Absolutely.
All right, let's just go to a move that took place today in the United States Senate, where it took until 2019 for the United States Senate to formally pass a bill outlawing lynching. Over the 20th century, Congress refused to move, even when thousands of black people, including black men wearing their military uniforms, were lynched in this country. They were being blocked by Southern Dixiecrats and by racists of both parties who did not have the moral leadership to actually say that this is against the law. The three sponsors of this bill, the three black United States senators, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Tim Scott, as well as Senator Cory Booker. You have to ask yourself the question, where were white senators all of these years in terms of sponsoring such a bill? The other thing that jumps out of this particular bill is that, first of all, it was unanimously passed by the United States Senate. And so this was what was said today on the floor.
Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-488 introduced earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-488, a bill to amend Title 18, United States Code to specify lynching as a deprivation of civil rights and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceed to the measure? Without objection.
I ask that the bill be considered read a third time.
Without objection.
I know of no other or further debate on the bill.
If there's no further debate, questions on passage of the bill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is passed. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you to all of our colleagues.
Again, there have been nearly 200 failed attempts to pass such bill. Shannon, I'll start with you. There were some people who said, look, this is a waste of time. When's the last time we had a lynching? Let's not act as if it can't happen again. So this bill does matter. So on one side, you want to think, wow, do we have to have this bill? Like, is that still a real possibility? But on the other side, when you live in reality, you know it is. My grandfather was raised by his grandmother because his father was lynched. So I understand that these things did happen, and in a lot of cases, there are folks, I believe, that would still like it to happen. So the fact that in 2019, we're in a place where we need a law to say
no, 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 you can't do that, is rather sad and pathetic in itself.
And in fact, Teresa, there's a 2018 story where Willie Jones Jr., his family says that he was found hanging in Mississippi, and they say that he was lynched. And so you have that case. You also have a case that took place in Piedmont Park in Atlanta. What case was referred to the FBI of a man who was found hanging from a tree. And so we've had several stories like this that have taken place where you've had investigations of black men found hanging from a tree. And so, yeah, this still matters.
Absolutely, it still matters. You know, I can't help but to still think we're, 51 days out of slavery. 51, I'm sorry, days, years out of, it feels like days, right? But
Yes.
51 years out of slavery. And yes, we are still having these issues, where economic disparity is happening on all levels, where young men are afraid to go to work without somebody, pulling over in the car and just shooting right in. But like you said, we're having the lynching, we're having the nooses. And, it's still, unfortunately, a conversation and a bill that, over 200 times it needed to be passed. I'm glad it's passed, but now it's really time to enforce and train and make sure, everyone knows about this bill. So I think some public awareness about it, because it wasn't getting as much conversation about it today or the week. So I think a little bit more public awareness about it will definitely put those who are considering to go back to the bad times, put them in place.
Greg, we have to right wrongs of history.
Yes.
You've had cases where apologies were offered 100 years later. In some cases, reparations were offered. Financial settlements were actually made. And so to act as if this is not important, to me, is wrong, but it also shows you the importance of representation, because 3 black United States senators, which is the highest number we've had in the United States Senate since Reconstruction at any given time, that matters.
It does. Roland, it's bittersweet, though. 1918, Leonidas Dyer introduced an anti-lynching bill, the Dyer anti-lynching bill. He was a congressman, white congressman from St. Louis, from Missouri. That bill passed the House of Representatives in 1922, but as you said, it was stymied on the Senate side by these Southern recalcitrant Democrats. It kept getting introduced, it kept getting blocked, and then in 1934, the Costigan-Wagner bill was introduced. It too failed, and as you said, these Southern Democrats, these Dixiecrats eventually, who are now in the Republican Party, their descendants, blocked that bill. And something struck me in terms of even how the bill, as you showed the clip there, Senator Harris kind of, smiling, and I'm sure there was some relief, there was some celebration, but this is a very somber moment. I think about Ida B. Wells Barnett. Ida B. Wells Barnett was the champion of anti-lynching legislation from the 19th century. I think about Timothy Thomas Fortune and Walter White and W.E.B. Du Bois and all the anti-lynching advocates who I don't know that they would be smiling today in celebration, because quite frankly, now it's got to go past the House. And I wonder if some of these right-wing, ultra-right nationalists like Jim Jordan from Ohio or the leader of the Freedom Caucus, Mark Meadows, are going to vote to pass it. I wonder, will it be unanimous on a day that we're just now hearing that they are going to back President Trump, who this man is getting ready to perhaps call a national emergency. I don't know that, it'll pass, but it'll be very interesting to see who votes against it, if anyone does, on the House side.
All right, then. Okay, folks, let's go to our next story, which I find to be quite interesting. So, do you guys have the Trump Lives Matter stinger ready? Y'all got it ready?
Trump Lives.
Guys, I don't know why we don't have it. Get it ready. So here's the deal. We created this Trump Lives Matter stinger. It's something that I have used since Donald Trump won November 2016. Because Donald Trump has lied consistently. He's given, maybe in his 2.5 years, I'm talking about more than 8,000 lies, mischaracterizations, whatever you want to call it. And so that's why we created this. Okay. Don't have. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, we came up, of course, hashtag Trump Lives Matter. If you go to Twitter, you'll see that all the time. Okay. You'll see it. I use it all the time, every time he lies. So here's what's quite interesting. So the New York Times has been very afraid to say Donald Trump lies. They come up with falsehoods, mischaracterizations, all of these other phrases to explain this. But check this out. They had a story the other day about the controversy, if you will, no big deal, of Senator Kamala Harris on the Breakfast Club talking about how she was smoking weed in college in '86, listening to Tupac and Snoop, even though they didn't come on the scene until 5 to 7 years later. This was the headline in the New York Times, okay? Kamala Harris is accused of lying about listening to Tupac. Here's what happened. Okay. This, Teresa, is a newspaper that will not say Trump lies, but clearly has no problem putting in the headline, Kamala Harris accused of lying.
It's funny because Donald Trump, I think, gives the New York Times the most promotion because he's like, oh, the lying New York Times, and then New York Times numbers go up for followers. So yeah, I find it very alarming when I saw that headline. Well, one, I'm like, why is the New York Times actually reporting on the Breakfast Club about what she decided to listen to or what she didn't listen to, or if she got the wrong artist wrong? Who cares, back then? But I guess as a candidate, I guess anything goes, but no, I think it's a little distasteful for the New York Times to be who they are. I would probably expect that in another publication, just not the New York Times. So they need to do better, especially with the editorial department. But it's just not right. But it is something to take notice as this campaign season begins to unravel.
I mean, I don't understand, Shannon, how again, you're afraid to use it with Donald Trump. Like somehow, oh my goodness, we can't call the president of the United States lying, but we'll use it in reference to a United States senator.
So, a couple things. One, there should be, and don't jump down my throat, but there should be enough respect for the office of the president that you wouldn't call the president a liar. However...
But how about him not lying?
However, it seems that in politics, that is a part of the job description. I understand what they're saying about the discrepancies with regards to Senator Harris. Show me a politician that hasn't misquoted, quote unquote. For them to be able to say it about one and not the other, I see how that is a little bit off. It's a difficult line because there's certain things that you should do to respect the office of the president, but there are a lot of folks that say, this man is not one that fits anything that looks like a president, so it's hard to live by that. And I get it. Not sure where you go with that, but it seems like if you're not going to call this one, then you shouldn't call that one either.
Greg, this really is not that hard. And again, sure, no one wants to say, oh, the president's lying, but if you're lying, I'm going to say you're lying.
Well, you've been saying it all along. It's interesting to me, Roland. Like I said, years ago, when Trump began his really public run for president, the man who was a pathological liar, you began calling his lies out from day one, and then slowly.
Day one?
From slowly. I mean, maybe it was Lawrence O'Donnell at first, but I mean, slowly a few people put their toes in this kind of white stream commercial media. And now, of course, it's all the cachet in the world. Chris Cuomo is making a living of inviting people who should never be on the airwaves, like Kellyanne Conway and the Mooch on to make these fake debates, and he wants to call them out as liars. It's cute. But in the case of the Gray Lady, to use the New York Times old nickname, an institution likes to see itself as the gold standard of print journalism. They're trying to scrap for relevance. So they're trying to get clicks. It's clickbait. So they're going to use that to characterize Kamala Harris. And in fact, while the United States is involved in an ongoing coup d'etat in Venezuela, They're worried about the Breakfast Club and whether Kamala Harris talked about smoking weed and got the year right. This is even bigger than whether they'll call her a liar and not call Trump a liar. It's about the decline of American journalism and the fact that we're now looking at a journalism profile where sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the tabloids and the papers that claim to be upholding standards of journalism. And it's really just revealing the fact that they are not, in fact, the standard.
All right, folks. Hold tight 1 second. Got to go to a break. We come back. We got a number of other stories for you, including a rapper shot and killed by 6 cops while sleeping in his car. This story makes no sense. Back on Roland Martin Unfiltered just a moment.
I believe I was born to help my people to be free. Boxing champion Muhammad Ali.
All right, folks, hashtag HBCU Giving Day. Our school for the day is American Baptist College. Of course, founded in 1924 in Greg Carr's hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. Notable graduates include Congressman John Lewis, Bernard Lafayette, Minister C.T. Vivian, James Bevel, Leroy Gilbert, and Clevant Derricks. If you want to support American Baptist College, please go to ABC Nash, abcnash.edu. And so we certainly want you to do that. All right, folks, let's talk about HBCUs and Ford calling all HBCU alumni, students, as well as leaders. Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities, and they are offering up a $25,000 mobility challenge grant. Now, here's the winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply, folks, is March 31st, 2019. We want you to go to FGB.Life, FGB.Life for more information and to apply. Don't forget, the deadline is March 31st, 2019, and Ford goes further in our community, and we certainly thank Ford Cares for being a partner here at Roland Martin Unfiltered and for them supporting HBCUs. This week on Capitol Hill, we saw the House Democrats finally, after 2 decades, pass gun legislation. This, of course, is the same week where we had to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of Parkland, where, of course, 14 students and 3 staff members were shot and killed a year ago on this particular day. It was also quite emotional to see Lucy McBath, Congresswoman Lucy McBath, react after it passed out of the House Judiciary Committee. This is a woman who lost her son, Jordan Davis, the case out of Jacksonville, Florida, where it was allegedly had his music too loud. She became a gun control advocate, and last year was elected to Congress. And so talk about amazing. Here is Lucy McBath speaking out in favor of this bill.
I'm so proud to be an original co-sponsor because this is historic. I have been working on this legislation for the last 6 years as a survivor of gun violence myself, and I refuse to let anyone in this room challenge this bill as legislation that is not germane to saving as many lives as we possibly can. The overwhelming bipartisan support for universal background checks symbolizes the power of advocacy and the incredible power of the survivors like myself and many of them that are sitting in this room, family members and students who have shared their stories as they advocate over and over again for common sense gun safety solutions and demand that we act to address the extremist culture. And today we are finally taking action. The 2 bills that sit before us today will ensure mothers and fathers have one less reason to worry about when they send their children off to school. They'll give students one less thing to fear when they walk into their schools. And most importantly, it will make our communities and our nation a safer place. I talk to victims. I've been working with victims for the last 6 years, and I refuse to talk to one more parent that is scared every single day when they send their children off to school. I refuse to let my colleagues stand here and devalue the importance that this bill has. And I am so grateful to everyone in this room, and I'm so grateful to my colleagues that continue to champion for common sense legislation that will save lives.
And folks, when it came time to vote, Lieutenant Bass said, for my son, Jordan Davis, I vote A. And so we certainly are glad to see this particular bill pass. As I said, first of all, out of committee. As I said, folks, today, the one-year anniversary of 17 people shot and killed at Parkland High School in Florida. Those young folks who survived have become enormous spokespeople on the issue of gun control. They had a huge impact in the midterm elections, mobilizing young people to vote on this issue, challenging Republicans and Democrats when it comes to the issue of gun control. One of the folks, of course, who is a survivor is Tyra Hemans. Tyra, of course, has also been out front as well. She joins us right now. Tyra, good to talk with you again. How are you?
How are you?
Doing great. How is today an emotional day for you, knowing it's the first anniversary of tragedy hitting your campus a year ago?
So absolutely, today's obviously like a pit in my stomach because I didn't expect for it to hit me as hard as it did, but it triggered me more when it was exactly 2:40 p.m. And then all of a sudden I was in class because I'm in college, and I had to be excused because I literally was just like feeling the heat, and like it was just a very emotional day because knowing that I went to school last year as a high schooler, like normal day, Valentine's Day, and then to leave that day knowing that I'm going to have to be an advocate, a proud like person, because the next day I was protesting because I knew that I cannot let this be forgotten. Because when I saw on the news that they had found who the killer was, I was just like, wow, he's going to get more notoriety if I don't say something. And that's how I looked at this situation. And today it was just a whole bunch of like cries, seeing all the social media mourns and like thoughts and prayers. And like today I went to go see my friend's father, like Joaquin's dad. He put a mural in New York for the 17 people today, and it was just, I saw my teacher. It was very nice. Like it helped bring like light back to this day, but it was just a very emotional day. I don't know if words can really describe a feeling, but that's how I'm going to describe it. Like today was just emotional.
One of the things that that obviously jumps out, I mean, this is a day that people celebrate love, and having to remember folks who lost their life on this day. You talk about being an activist. I'm sorry, go ahead.
They lost their loved ones this day. Like today is the day that you wake up and then you know it's going to be Valentine's Day with your family. It's like a bunch of love, hearts. It's love. Like it hurts more because it's like a mental image. It's like every time I see all this love, I know that the people that I should be saying Happy Valentine's to, they're not here. And it's like they died on a day that I'm supposed to be cherishing, loving someone, being here, being in my presence, but they're not in my presence. And that's what really hurts because it's like such a very bad tragedy happened on a day of love. And that's the worst thing that could ever happen. Like, not worst thing because there's like, but that was the worst thing. Like, what am I saying? That like, I don't even know. Like, today is a very, like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm going through it.
You and I talked on the Tom Joyner Morning Show when you and others were traveling around this country. And so many people have been touched by Parkland students, not just for how y'all have handled this mass shooting, but also the level of activism, how you have challenged politicians, how you have been unwilling to back down, and how you have also mobilized other young people to understand the power of the vote. You played a huge role in the midterm elections in 2018. Do you see this intensity continuing through the 2020 presidential campaign?
100%, 100%, because us knowing that in our country, we have to, like, to get stuff changed in our country, you have to do a political sense. So that is why when come the elections, like, we have to push for it, because we all know we need to get someone out of the House, because they just showed us that they will never ever care for this country the way a president's supposed to. So as a advocate for lives, like, obviously we care about everyone. We want prosperity for everyone. So us fighting the fight, we're always going to put 100% in it.
And final question. Again, when we look at this, for a lot of people, they assume that only white students were impacted. You and other African Americans made it perfectly clear that your voices mattered as well. And what has that been like as you have worked with others, leaned on others to get them to understand that Black voices matter too?
Oh. I didn't hear what you said in the first beginning, but
That again, the importance of Black voices matter. That we see more than just white Parkland students. That you and others have also been hearing from other Black students across the country who have also been impacted by gun violence.
So what I say to that is that's why I initially moved, because I want to help bring the voices here, because when Parkland did happen, I'm going to be the first to tell you, it's because a bunch of white kids got shot, but they were my friends too. But how it happened, it made people tune in, because this happens in every rural urban area. And people just look at that as, oh, it's a 5 o'clock news segment, on to the next. But it's like, these kids have voices that are like as powerful as ours, because we all suffer the same trauma. And if we have to feel I'm telling you, I want to be able to push forward the voice, because we're all we all know what's happening in our community. It's just, they're being incarcerated, you're being brutally killed, you're being it's just not fair, and people are not given the right outlet or the right voice to speak about it, and it's just, we have to bring those forward.
All right. Well, Tyra, we appreciate you joining us on this day. I told you that we will stay connected, and I will use my platforms to ensure that you always had a voice. Glad to see that you are still out there using your voice. Good luck in your first year in college. Anytime you want to talk, give us a ring.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
You do the same. I just want to go to my panel here real quickly before I go to my next story. And Teresa, look, there's no 17 or 18-year-old person out there who wants to be initiated into this fraternity or sorority. It reminds me of when we talk about mothers of the movement. We talk about the civil rights movement, Betty Shabazz, Coretta Scott King, and Myrlie Evers, women who lost their husbands to assassination. When you look at the mothers of the movement, whether you're talking about Eric Garner's mother, whether you talk about Sabrina Fulton, whether you talk about Lucy McBath, these Black women who have lost their children to police violence or gun violence. Now you have these young people who should be full of life, enjoying their freshman year in college or their senior years. But on this day, they're dealing with the issue of 17 folks being gunned down right in front of them at their high school last year.
Agreed. The pressure is at an all-time high, especially with the day commemorating what it is, but also them being pressured into joining any type of sorority or fraternity, that has to relive this. They should be doing, again, it's only been a year, but they should be still taking the time to heal, taking the time to reflect, and trying to, bring the livelihood of life back to what they used to love before this situation happened. Now, I'm not saying we should forget about the past, but we have to focus on the future, but also not put the pressure on the young minds who, is taking it in daily, also taking in national news of what's going on without, it's like, for me, I feel like they're making civil rights activists, at an early age versus them preparing these students for next steps. So I think there should be a better approach, and it should be some more leadership that can help them guide the way.
Shannon, look, they're targeting a number of folks in your party. And I would dare say, I fully understand a lot of Republicans and some Democrats being ardent supporters of the Second Amendment. But these students are not going away. And they are mobilizing and energizing young voters. And if you are 16 years old today, you're going to be voting for president in 2 years. That could pose a hell of a voting block for a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old folks who are very concerned about gun control and mass shootings in schools.
So I think there's a couple of issues. One is, I don't think it should be a problem to understand fully who it is that's trying to purchase a gun. I get it. But I also think that we need to seriously look at what we do in this country in terms of healthcare, and specifically mental health care. There's obviously a trend here that is not a good trend, and there are reasons behind it. And until we address those issues, you can regulate as much as you want, which, I do think that it's a very good idea to know who it is that is trying to purchase a gun. I get that. But we also need to address the other side of it, which is mental health care in this country.
Greg, look, we absolutely must deal with mental health care, but we also have to contend with this reality that in this country, we have somehow assumed the position that everybody should be able to have a gun. It doesn't matter who they are. In fact, I retweeted earlier this statement that was made by Supreme Court Justice Warren Burger, who was not a liberal. And he said this: the gun lobby's interpretation of the Second Amendment is one of the greatest pieces of fraud. I repeat the word fraud on the American people by special interest groups that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And the real purpose of the Second Amendment was to ensure that state armies, the militia, would be maintained for the defense of the state. The very language of the Second Amendment refutes any argument that it was intended to guarantee every citizen an unfettered right to any kind of weapon he or she desires.
That's absolutely right, Roland. I mean, any legal scholar will tell you this is a complete misinterpretation of the Second Amendment. It is indefensible intellectually. And for all of our friends out there who say that voting doesn't matter, I think we can all agree. When you see Lucy McBath cast that vote in the name of her son, Jordan Davis, when you see Rashida Tlaib out of Michigan, or Ilhan Omar out of Minnesota, or when you see Ocasio-Cortez out of the Bronx, you know, voting matters because now there's somebody at the table that can break the back of this lie. Voting is not the only solution, but it is a weapon that we should not keep in the drawer. Lucy McBath, that was so powerful today, brother. And because now somebody gets in there to change these things. And the other thing I want to mention is with young Tyra Hyman's, who this day, last year, got accepted into the school that she's at now, Pace University. On the day she got her acceptance letter, her school got shot up. But if you look at her social media following, it is tiny compared to David Hogg and some of these white students. And when you said you would allow her to use your platform, you would use that platform to get her message out, she's not just speaking for herself, she's speaking for black children. And as Teresa said, she shouldn't have to at 18 years old. To have that prescience of mind is very powerful. When those peace warriors came from Chicago down to Florida and said, look, it happens to us every day on the way to school. This is an opportunity. And when you have young people who should never, as she said, have to be elevated to that, it is our responsibility to provide them platform, because let's be clear, as she is clear, it was only when whiteness got touched that this became a conversation at all.
Very true. All right, final story here, folks, and that is the folks at Product have brought on Ava DuVernay to co-chair their new Diversity and Inclusion Council. Now, remember, they released these blackface keychains back in December. It got them into hot trouble. You see a photo of them right there. Now, Gucci, of course, is going through their own issue. You had folks like Spike Lee and others calling for a boycott of Gucci. 50 Cent burned a Gucci shirt and said he would no longer be repping the brand because of a blackface sweater. What is interesting here is that Prada says it is partnering with universities and other educational institutions to create internships and apprenticeships for people of color in the fashion industry. Real quick here, Teresa, I always have issues when folks start talking internships and apprenticeships. No, there are a bunch of grown people who are qualified to work in these companies, who should be in senior level management positions, not just internships and apprenticeship positions.
I agree. This is the wrong response. So for me, that statement that Prada just released is for me saying, come work with us for free. I will show you, and you can blog about it, and you can social media and Snapchat, and basically show that we didn't mean it. We really are open to diversity and inclusion. But really, if anybody's coming to the apprenticeship and the internship, they all know they're still at level 1 out of a huge building, right? We want to get to the 12th floor. And in order to get to the 12th floor, we need those opportunities to be open. We need senior level management to say, there is a job opportunity that's open and that's widespread, that's posted on LinkedIn at the very least, so people could be a part of the overall vision. So then when it is time for some of those advertising and marketing materials to be released to the public, when it is time for them to showcase the next product that they want to sell to the public, it won't be an issue. It won't be a black face attached, but it'll be something appropriate and something that won't dominate headlines and also offend the African American community.
Of course, Shannon, I always get a kick out of this because folks want to run higher. We'll bring folks who are we'll bring in interns and apprenticeships that yet none of them will ever be in the room when these decisions are made. So that ain't the answer to Prada's problem.
So no, if you're talking about diversity and inclusion, which again, teaching people how to keep their feet out of their mouths, that's not going to happen by an intern or an apprentice. It's not. And a lot of times, it's not going to happen by somebody that you might have that slipped under the radar in middle management, because they're going to want to keep their job and their 401k, so they're probably not going to tell you what they need to tell you, which, in all honesty, if we were really on a fair level playing field, nobody would have to tell you because you would know, period. Why should we have to have laws or teach people things that I'm pretty sure in a lot of cases they learned in preschool that seem to have conveniently forgotten? Children
well,
are better.
Again, Greg, whether it is media, whether it is fashion houses, it is still consistent that you do not see African Americans in those high-level positions where someone could say, that's a dumb idea. You might not want to do that.
Isn't it interesting, in a world that is increasingly non-white, in a country that is increasingly non-white, these people still don't get it. Now, here's a couple of things. Number one, no respectable group of people should ever allow celebrities to be the people they look to for leadership and information. Now, Ava DuVernay is a little bit different category. I think that sister is always trying to do the right thing. She's trying to open the door. But when they ask her to serve, I think maybe her response could be, yeah, here is a list of people who should be there before me. Now, if you have platform, 50 Cent has platform, and I love what he did when Money Mayweather, again, reminded us of what happens to a mind that is someone has lost their mind when he goes and spends all this money on Gucci. In those situations, we can take a celebrity action and use it to our advantage. But at the end of the day, if Gucci or Prada had to rely on Greg Carr's dollars to survive, they would both be bankrupt. We have a choice, and that's what we learned from the Montgomery bus boycott. If you withhold your money, they will do whatever you want them to do in order to get that money back.
Absolutely, but see, that's the story
you speak of you speak of Floyd Mayweather. I did send him a message saying, let's have a conversation about that, bruh, because you have a level of influence, and just saying, I'm gonna keep dropping $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. That ain't the way to do it. because you saw what happened to Dapper Dan in Harlem
Yes.
when Gucci happened. The CEO of Gucci is flying to New York this week to meet with Dapper Dan specifically on this issue. That's how you use your power. And so Floyd Mayweather, you might be 50-0 in the ring, you might have power there, but you sure as hell don't know how to fight outside of the ring when it comes to issues like this. Certainly want to thank Teresa, Shannon, and Greg for being with us. Hey, folks, tomorrow we will not have a live show. I'm here at NBA All-Star Game, but what we do have tomorrow is an amazing 1-hour interview with the great Chuck D. You do not want to miss the interview with the founder of Public Enemy. It is a fascinating conversation I had with him, and it is one that you do not want to miss, that you want to share far and wide. Also, folks, I posted this on social media today, and that is, in the last year, this month is really the first anniversary of Roland Martin Unfiltered digital platform. When TV One canceled the show in December of 2017, I immediately made the decision that we were going to launch this initiative. I purposely did not pursue a job at another media company, at another television network, because I knew we needed something that was our own, that was independent, and that was free. Over the past year, we have done a number of things. Guys, do me a favor and kill the music. Over the past year, we have done a number of things. We broadcast live from Operation Hope Global Forum. We did 3.5 days of coverage from Memphis, from MLK 50. We broadcast live from the NAACP convention. We brought you one-on-one interviews with Reverend Dr. James Lawson, as I said, Chuck D. Monday, we're going to have Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Lisa Ray, Erica Ash, Erica Alexander, Clarence Jones, Reverend C.T. Vivian, Zernona Clayton, Juanita Abernathy, Bernice King, MLK III, Bill Lucy, the great labor leader, and it goes on and on and on. Ambassador Andrew Young, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., all of these things that we have done. We brought you live streaming of events, whether it was the AME protest rally outside of the White House, whether it was the other leadership conference on civil rights. And I'm saying all of that is because this is about covering things that other people totally ignore. This is about creating a platform for the Black students at Parkland to be able and come and share their story. When it came to Botham Jean, the coverage on that case. Greg earlier talked about the dialogue that we've had surrounding the allegations against Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. We've had 1,215 of you who have joined our Bring the Funk fan club, and we're absolutely thankful for that. We're thankful for AFS-CME coming along and being one of our partners. We're thankful for other folks who have come along. We also need more of you to join our Bring the Funk fan club. The things that we have planned in 2019 are immense. There are other conferences that we plan on covering. And look, for instance, in a couple of weeks, I've gotten an email. The folks in Selma want me to come there for the commemoration of Bloody Sunday, and to cover that. We want to be able to travel to things like that, to be able to live stream those things for you and to cover those things for you. The 2020 presidential election is coming up. We now know the first debate will be taking place in June of this year. We want to be there to be able to tell the story, to cover these candidates. So what we need, those of you who are watching us right now on Periscope, on Facebook, on YouTube, we need you to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Our goal is very simple: to get 20,000 of our followers to contribute a minimum of $50 for the year. You can pay monthly, you can pay at one time, but again, you funding us allows for us to be independent, allows for us to be able to tell our story. But I keep saying we must fund our freedom. What you're watching, folks, isn't free. All of this has to be paid for, okay? The lights, the camera, the microphones, the studio, all must be paid for. And so we can't expect other people to cover us when they haven't done it thus far. And so I want you to go to our Bring the Funk fan club. I would love for us to get to 5,000 patrons by the end of March. That means adding 3,800 people between now and the end of March. I want us to do that. And so again, if you go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can choose between Cash App, PayPal, and Square to join our Bring the Funk fan club. As long as I have a voice, I'm still trying to get it back. After being sick for the past couple of weeks, I'm going to use that voice. I don't want to have to go and go somewhere else where they're not going to tell our story, because we need to have our own show. And building this show into a network, we're able to hire other voices and create other shows, because that's what we need as we're moving forward in the 21st century. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com and join our Bring the Funk fan club today. Every dollar you give goes to make this show possible. So I want you to do that. So again, don't forget, tomorrow, Chuck D, one-on-one, right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. On Monday, we're going to have Congresswoman Maxine Waters, one-on-one, right here. This weekend, we'll also be streaming for you the 2-hour talk I gave at William and Mary College in Virginia. Trust me, I didn't hold back there as well. And so all of that for you. Please support RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Share it with your friends and your family, your frat brothers, your sorority sisters. Let's make this thing possible. All right, folks, from Charlotte, y'all have a great time. I'm going to go dinner with my wife, Jackie, for Valentine's Day, also her birthday. Y'all have a great